We've got Art with us now. Art from Pennsylvania, welcome in. He says, does matter exist? Matter is not what we experience, but our explanation for what we experience. That's an interesting statement. Art, can you expound on that?
Yeah, sure. Hello, Justin and Jim. If I sit in a dark room and I try to decide what's there, what I find is I have physical sensations, emotional sensations, mental sensations, and there's my awareness of those sensations. So what I know to exist, this goes back to Descartes and brain in a vat. That's where I'm going with this. So what I know.
Yeah, it's not a problem of hard solipsism. There's nothing new here. What's your point? Can you just jump forward past hard solipsism to what your point is?
My point is that matter is not what we experience, or it may be, but it's an explanation for what we experience, and there are other explanations. That's it. I mean, that's all I'm calling about. I do have a question, if you have time, about Exodus, but this is what I'm calling about.
Well, I'd love to answer your question about Exodus. Can I ask you a question about what you called in for first?
Sure. Absolutely.
Are you positing that you personally are not made of matter?
No. What I'm saying is that one explanation for what I experience is matter. Another explanation is I'm a brain in a vat. Another explanation is Descartes' evil demon who's making me hallucinate the world. Immanuel Kant said we only experience phenomena. We cannot experience the noumena, what causes the phenomena. This is somewhat of a philosophical point, and if you guys aren't interested in it, that's fine. But that's my point. That's what I called about. Did that answer your question, Justin?
I think, well, maybe. I guess I'm trying to figure out what your position is, right? So, like, I know that there are various positions you can take on this. I want to know what your position is. Do you think that we are material?
No, I don't. I think that the cause of our sensations is really unknown to us.
Okay, so you don't know if we actually exist?
No. Of course we exist. If I'm a brain in a vat, I would be experiencing exactly what I experience right now.
Right. So how do you know that Justin and I exist?
I'm assuming you do. Hard solipsism, you have to take a.
Yeah, this is why I don't care about hard solipsism, because it makes no difference to anything.
Right. So I think that we can short circuit the conversation, or at least get faster through it. If we say, like, well, listen, if you think that it's possible that we're a brain in a vat, then it's also just possible that whatever God you're arguing for is just part of us imagining that God existing, being brains in a vat. I'm not sure if solipsism gets you any closer to God than it would further away from God. I think it's just kind of a useless talking point.
Yeah, you guys keep mentioning solipsism. All I'm saying is, okay, here's an example. Newtonian mechanics is not true, but it's useful. Now by going beyond Newtonian mechanics, I'm sorry.
You're saying it's not useful?
No. I'm saying Newtonian mechanics is not true, but it's useful. We use it every day. Engineers use it. But
what do you mean it's not true?
Like looking for the truth. I'm sorry.
When you say it's not true, what do you mean?
General relativity and quantum mechanics are true, or at least they're truer. Newtonian mechanics is a good approximation, right? Do you agree with that? Both of you?
I don't think those are related.
I don't even know. I'm not even sure what your point is. You talked about something about solipsism, then you went into this, and we're talking. And when you're talking about brain in a vat, you're talking about hard solipsism, right? You're talking about how do we know anything exists outside of our own mind, right? So how does that prove that your God exists?
I never mentioned God. I never mentioned hard solipsism. I just called up to say basically that matter is a theory. It's an explanation of what we experience, and it might not be true. And Newtonian mechanics is a very good explanation of what we experience, but by investigating its truth, we discovered relativity and quantum mechanics and lasers and GPS.
Right, but let me go back to my point. Hard solipsism is that the only thing we can experience is our own mind. And that's the only thing that is certain, which is what you're saying. So if you don't even understand what hard solipsism is, and you're saying who brought up solipsism, you are bringing up solipsism and hard solipsism at that. And okay, so what? You're a theist. How does that fit in with your idea of God?
Well, first of all, because I don't know what is causing my sensations, that's not saying my sensations are the only thing that exists. You guys brought up hard solipsism. I never mentioned it. And I reject the idea.
You don't have to mention it. You brought it up. You brought it up. That's the whole topic we're talking about, is hard solipsism. Whether you know it or not is irrelevant. That is hard solipsism. Go look it up.
Yeah. So maybe I misjudge your intentions, Art. Maybe we can start over. Is this an argument for the existence of God or not?
No, not at all. It's just I'm just calling up to make the philosophical point that I've already stated.
But I think we agree. So it's not really a point that's helpful for our discussion. Like, we agree that everybody falls into the trap of hard solipsism because no one can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not brains in a vat. Now, I think maybe we've got good reasons to believe otherwise, but like, on this point, I'm not sure there's anything to argue about. I'm more interested to argue about whether or not there's a God that exists, which is kind of the point of the call-in show. Did you have anything on that topic that you wanted to talk about? Or you said you had a question on Exodus too.
Yeah. And this is just a very short question, Justin. There's a line in Exodus where Moses and Aaron changed the waters of the Nile to blood and kill all the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next line says, and the Egyptian magicians did the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that to me is like even more absurd than much of the rest of the Bible. But I've never heard that point brought up, that how can the Egyptian magicians kill the fish that Moses and Aaron have already killed and turned the water of the Nile to blood, that Moses and Aaron have already turned to blood? I think that's a great objection. I've never heard it. So I wanted to ask you, since you obviously know so much about the Bible, is that a valid objection, or maybe am I misreading it? Now, this is entirely different from what I called about, but I think it's an interesting question. So there you go.
No, you are right. Okay, so there's a spot in Exodus chapter 7, I believe, where it talks about them being able to mimic some of the tricks that they did, and one of them was turning the water into blood. Now, it's interesting the way Exodus narrates it. It refers to it. Some translations will say sorcery. That's a gloss. It actually refers to dark arts, referring to like a demonic magic, right? Because for the biblical authors, it wasn't like God was the only superpower or the only power that existed. There were a demonic realm that was being interacted with, and they believed that the Egyptians were actually utilizing, these demonic powers. In fact, if you go to Exodus chapter 12, the God himself seems to admit that there are other gods. He says, I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn of the land of Egypt, from human to animal, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute justice. So there's this idea in the Bible that this monotheism that we think of isn't really a biblical concept the way we think of it. There's a whole realm of gods and demons and things like that, and they can empower people to do things. In fact, in Deuteronomy 13, God says, listen, if a prophet appears among you giving you omens and portents, and the omens and portents prove to be true that they're predicting, don't follow that person, even though they came true. It's a false prophet. I'm sending someone to test you whether or not you do indeed love the Lord your God. So everything we know about the Bible says that there are other powers other than the power of God, but it also says that disease is called by unclean spirits, and it's not. You could just wash your hands better and probably deal with a lot of these issues, which makes Mark chapter 7 even more remarkable, because in Mark chapter 7, he chastises the Pharisees for trying to force people to wash their hands according to the tradition of the elders. And if he really cared about people, he would have said, listen, that's not a law of Moses, but yeah, everyone wash your hands. You don't end up like the demoniac.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a long-winded answer.
No, but I get that. But my point is, if Moses changes his staff to a snake and the Egyptian magicians do the same thing, all right, they did the same thing. You don't have to believe it, but it's at least possible. But if Moses kills all the fish and changes all the water to blood, there's no way for the Egyptian people who practice dark arts to do the same thing, because the freaking fish are already dead and the water has already been turned to blood. So that line to me just seems like a total anyway. But I just wanted to see.
Well, it gets worse than that.
You know, that's not a valid criticism, huh? I'm sorry.
No, it's a good criticism, and it gets worse than that because it does say that all of the water turned to blood, which means there was no more water to be turned into blood. But it gets even worse because, remember, the frogs haven't come yet. And when the plague of the frogs comes, where do they come from? The frogs come from the river, which means somehow, even though all the water in Egypt was turned to blood, the frogs are living in blood water. That's not possible. Frogs can't live in blood water. They would die. So like nothing in the story makes sense. It's a story of mythology, which is why it doesn't make sense.
Well, that frog point was just one I had not thought of. But yeah, okay. Well, that was my add-on question. So thank you. Oh, by the way, Mark 15 has Jesus saying, God commands that the cursing child should be put to death. That was when the Pharisees criticized him for his followers not washing their hands. And he comes back.
Mark 7, yeah.
Well, you don't follow. Yeah. So anyway, but okay, guys, like I said, I just called him at this philosophical point. I didn't think it was going to be like a gangbuster, and it is what it is.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We thought you were giving an argument for God. You see what I'm saying?
No. And Justin, last week I called and I talked about Spinoza's God. I'm more of a philosophical type person than a theist. And
gotcha. That's fair.
So
I didn't understand the purpose of the call. That's my fault.
Yeah, it was just, I'm saying it's an explanation for what we experience. Let's leave it at that. That's my point. So.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling, Art.
Well, thank you. Thank you both, guys.
Cheers. Have a good one.